Thank you.
There we go.
All right. Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for joining proactively early. We will get started soon.
Well, that's not too bad. I can do you side by side, Adele.
Well, let me start my screen sharing, and then we can iterate on what it looks like once I start doing that. Give me just a moment. Hello, folks. We'll get started in just a moment. All right, Glenn, and will you just confirm for me that you can?
We got your PowerPoint.
Great, perfect. Okay, and in terms of the settings of this, is the configuration look right to you? I don't see the option to do the gallery side-by-side thing, but that's fine. If it looks good to you, I'm happy. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being prompt. We'll get started in just a few minutes here. Hello, folks. Good afternoon. All right. Well, we'll give everyone, I am going to be prompt because we have lots to cover today. But I will give folks just 1 or 2 more minutes to dial in here. Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome. So glad you could all join. I don't know about you all, but it's tough to tear myself away from the news right now. It is a ridiculously rapidly changing world. So anyways, appreciate you all joining today. All right, we'll give it 1 more minute and then we will dive into our content for today. Welcome, everyone. Yes, we will be recording this session, so fear not. And we will also be sharing all the slides, so you can just take in the information. All right, so in the interest of time, let's dive in. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the State of California's State Apprenticeship Expansion, Equity, and Innovation Grant Information Session. So I am Adele Burns. I'm the Deputy Chief here at the Division of Apprenticeship Standards. And this whole thing today is made possible by funding from the U.S. Department of Labor, which I'll get into more later today, but this is all from a grant that we received from DOL. And it is the Department of Industrial Relations, and within that, the Division of Apprenticeship Standards, that we are deploying this grant into the apprenticeship ecosystem. So the intent of the conversation today is going to be to give you both a bit of an overview about the grant and also a little bit about the funding source that it is coming from. So I'll tell you a bit more about the DOL grant that we received. And then really the bulk of our time today is going to be spent on question and answers. So thank you to many folks who submitted very thoughtful questions. The deadline for questions was February 14th. So we received a whole bunch of questions, and I think we've managed to answer all of the questions that we received. We have redacted any identifying information in here and tried to kind of summarize where there was overlap for questions, but we are hopeful that we got all of the questions answered. So thank you for taking the time to submit those. We will be recording this session and posting it to the same webpage where you all found all the grant information already. And we will also be sharing this PowerPoint. So you know that that is both of those items will be available following this. So we will actually not be taking any questions live here. However, we do have a Q&A box, and I do have the DAS team supporting here, and they will take note of questions, and we will do our best to follow up on them. We can't promise anything, but we will do our best to follow up on them. And I'm hopeful that in the course of this session, you're getting a whole ton of information, and hopefully a lot of your questions are being answered. So with that, I will dive in. So what is this State Apprenticeship Expansion, Equity, and Innovation Grant, which we call the SAEEI grant? The idea of it is to support the development of new or the expansion of existing registered apprenticeship programs. So that's the overarching goal. And we went for this grant, and we're deploying this grant very much because we have this mandate from our governor of let's encourage businesses to become creators and not just consumers of talent. I love this articulation. I think it's a really great articulation of the challenge at hand. And we're working to establish this audacious goal of 500,000 earn and learn apprenticeships by 2029. So this is very much a North Star for a lot of this work. So this specific grant, the Division of Apprenticeship Standards is soliciting proposals from workforce development boards and apprenticeship program sponsors. And this is to develop new apprenticeship programs or to expand on existing programs, and specifically those that work to create opportunities for underserved communities. So we are looking to deploy about $7.3 million through this grant. And we're aiming to contract with at least 4 recipients to develop and operate multi-employer apprenticeships. So that's really the goal here. And importantly, proposals are due March 30th. So you have a whole month in front of you to get all of these pieces together to submit by March 30th. So any program that applies, all selected programs are required to work in collaboration with these 4 partner types. So you need a workforce board, you need an employer, organization, industry partner, but basically who's going to be employing the apprentices. You need a local education agency, an LEA, which is the academic partner that you're going to be collaborating with to deliver the education side of this. And then we also want you to be working with a community-based organization. And that very much goes to the equity goals around this, because when you have that community-based organization, I think you can better serve the populations that we're aiming to serve through this grant. So those are the 4 required partners for any proposal. And specifically to zoom in on workforce development boards, because they are playing a really important role in this opportunity. Workforce boards have a few choices as to how to engage here. Workforce boards can apply directly to be a program sponsor and to operate the multi-employer apprenticeship program, or they can partner with an apprenticeship program sponsor, or sometimes called an intermediary, to administer the multi-employer apprenticeship program. So whoever plays this role of apprenticeship program sponsor needs to be signing up to administer the apprenticeship program, register the apprentices with DAS, provide outreach to help reach out to more companies, to reach the targeted industries, and very importantly, to recruit the underrepresented populations such as women, people of color, veterans, justice-involved folks, people with disabilities, youth, and of course, all the folks who have been unemployed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the overarching role that workforce development boards can play, but they are certainly a critical partner in any proposal that's put forth, also because they are the fiscal entity for the grant. So I'll get to more of that in a little bit, but they are definitely critical partners in this particular grant opportunity. So in terms of the funding and outcomes, like I said earlier, it's about $2.3 million that we are looking to deploy through these this grant. And we are aiming to contract with at least 4 recipients to develop these multi-employer apprenticeships. And the awards will range from $240,000 to $2.5 million. And what should determine this is how many apprentices you feel like you can serve through this grant. So it's $4,800 per apprentice is the calculation, and we put together this little chart for you. So it's going to range anywhere from 50 to 521 participants in your apprenticeship program, and the amount you put forth should be based on how many folks you think you can be registering in your apprenticeship program over the term of the grant, which I'll get to. But this is how you should think about the calculation of how much you are going for in this grant. And grant recipients will receive a reimbursement of up to 25% of the overall award to be used for startup costs, such as setting up the program, bringing together all of the important partners to make it happen, developing curriculum, really any of the costs related to the design and startup of a registered apprenticeship program. And then, of course, the train-the-trainer costs, these kind of activities. So that's for startup. And then the remaining 75% of the grant will be dispersed through a pay-for-performance model to recipients after a 90-day retention of employment and registration. And this is employment as an apprentice, right? So this is not the post-apprenticeship employment. This is employed as an apprentice, which I'll get to in some of the questions that come up. But the costs may include, but are not limited to, so this is not an exhaustive list. Please go to the solicitation for proposals to see the full exhaustive list. But really, this is pretty flexible. It can be used for the training, project management, registering the apprentices, creating pathway for adult learners, including English language learners, supportive services such as transportation, equipment, uniforms, tools, all of these really important support services, again, that I think are important to creating an equitable apprenticeship program. I will also note it is possible to use these funds for employer incentives. This may not include wages to apprentices, but it can include some of the costs that employers have when training apprentices with equipment, or the mentor or journey person that's doing the training on the job. So these are just some examples. Like I said, please go to the solicitation to get the full list of allowable use of funds. But this is essentially the breakdown and the structure of how this funding will work. And very importantly, the timeline. So this was released on January 14th. Thank you for all the questions submitted by February 14th. We'll be getting to those in a moment. Obviously, we're here today in this teleconference. Coming up on the timeline, tomorrow, the notice of intent is due. Please don't overthink this one. This one doesn't need to be super formal. It's actually really just very, very helpful for us to gauge the level of interest so that we can be prepared to turn around the review and evaluation timeline effectively. So we would very much appreciate if folks can submit a notice of intent to apply. We're not going to hold you to this. We'll hold you to what you submit finally on March 30th. But this would be really, really helpful to us. So we would appreciate if folks can submit that notice of intent. It can be on letterhead, or it can be as simple as an email to the grants unit email that I'll provide at the end. The last date for us to respond to questions is March 11th. So you can expect that the recording of this, the slides from this, all of that will be posted to our website no later than March 11th, so that everyone is sure to get access to the answers to all the questions. And of course, March 30th is the big deadline in here for you all, which is that proposals are due by March 30th at 1 p.m. So notice that is 1 p.m. Then we are hoping to do the review and evaluation in the month of April and to be announcing the awards by the end of April. And we're aiming for an estimated project start date around July 1st, and we'll be charging towards that. And importantly, the project completion date is June 30th, 2025. So when you're thinking about how many apprentices can you be serving through your program, the timeline you should be thinking about is June 30th, 2025. That's the overall timeline. So just to give you a little bit more context on the source of funds, like I said at the beginning, this came from a US Department of Labor grant that the state of California put forth. And the timeline on that grant is 2021 through 2025. So that's why we have that June 30th, 2025 deadline as sort of the end date. And these grants come from a pool of money of about $99 million under this SAEEI grant. And 15 different states received awards from that, ranging from $2 to $10 million. We were very grateful to receive the maximum $10 million in funds. And like I said, the performance period for this is July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025. So you'll see those benchmark dates in a few moments, in a few contexts with our grant, of course, because we need to be performing under that broader grant. So the focus areas of the DOL grant, their target industries that they stated are healthcare, IT, cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, and other professional services and emerging industries. And the populations that they are aiming to serve is women, veterans, justice involved, people with disabilities, communities of color, and unemployed individuals impacted by COVID-19. So this is the overall focus area of the DOL grant. So hopefully you see that reflected in the solicitation for proposals that we have put out to you all, and the focus areas that we have. So this is the overall goals of that DOL grant. We're apprenticeship system expansion to support the development, modernization, diversification of registered apprenticeship programs, partnership and alignment to support workforce system alignment. So that's very much reflected in our focus on partnering with workforce development boards. And of course, just increasing the number of apprentices enrolled through registered apprenticeship programs, including from underrepresented populations. And then of course, innovation in apprenticeship expansion to include program development and recruitment strategies. So this is the overarching goal of that DOL grant. And here's a quote from Secretary Marty Walsh in the announcement of that, which is that the announcement reflects the Department of Labor's renewed commitment to expanding registered apprenticeship to train US workers and ensure that diversity and inclusion are core elements of our nation's post-pandemic economic recovery. Using registered apprenticeships to expand career opportunities for all workers, especially those in underrepresented populations, is a priority for the department and a critical component of the Biden-Harris administration's American Jobs Plan. So we are all working to bring that alive. So our specific grant here in California that we put forth to DOL focuses on the equity in apprenticeship to non-traditional industries by creating new ways to engage with employers, academic institutions, and workforce development organizations. So we, of the overarching goals of the DOL grant, we really focused in on the development, modernization, and diversification of registered apprenticeships, increasing the active number of enrolled apprentices, and developing innovative program and recruitment strategies. So that's really what we are going for. And therefore, our plan is to do what we're doing here, which is our solicitation for proposals to work with at least 4 regional workforce development boards and apprenticeship program sponsors. And we have an overarching goal to register a minimum of 1,500 new apprentices through the 4-year term of the grant and to meet the equity goals that have been put forth. So in terms of our targets, of course, in year 1, we knew we would be taking quite a bit of time to get organized and identify the partners, which is what we're in the process of now. So in year 1, we have pretty modest targets for the number of apprentices at 28. But as you can see in year 2, 3, and 4, that ramps up. With year 2, we're aiming for about 250, year 3, a little over 500, and by year 7, an additional 700. So this is really the forecasting that we used in terms of what we're aiming to serve in terms of the number of new registered apprentices. And our equity goals in the folks that we are serving through these programs is that we want to be serving at least 60% people of color, 40% women, and 10% people with disabilities and justice involved. So these are our goals, and we're very excited to see your proposals as to how you want to be working towards these goals. So with that, I'm going to dive into question and answers. And just a reminder again, I will be reading a whole bunch of material here because I want to be pretty precise on this. And we will not be taking any of the questions live, but we welcome you to put questions into the Q&A, and the DAS team will work to get responses to those, not in this session, but in follow-up. No promises, but we will absolutely do our best because we want to be supportive to you all as you develop programs. So certainly, as we were looking at all of the questions, we felt like it was very relevant to just go to the specific language around grant eligibility. It's relatively concise. So proposals shall be accepted from all eligible applicants, and proposals must meet the minimum requirements to be read and scored. So the most competitive proposals will be those that serve this grant in innovative ways, that strategize development of cross-functional relationships and system-wide collaboration. So this SAEEI grant is designed to provide startup funding to create new programs or for creating new occupations with existing registered apprenticeship programs. So therefore, a new apprenticeship program or an existing program that's adding an occupation will be eligible for this grant as long as that new occupation was registered with DAS after July 1st, 2021. So that's one of the places that you're seeing that date of the term of that DOL grant. So as long as you have a program that was newly registered since July 1st, 2021, you are considered kind of in the umbrella of this grant, or a new occupation to an existing program since July 2021. So applicants, proposals will be accepted from California local workforce development boards whose proposals include the required partnerships with employers, local education agencies, and community-based organizations. Local boards may be an apprenticeship sponsor, or they can partner with eligible local apprenticeship sponsors. So the eligible applicants can be either that apprenticeship sponsor or the workforce board. However, importantly, there has to be a local board in that mix because they will act as the fiscal agent for these program models. So that's definitely important to point out in here. Now, participants, the intent of this SFP is to fund projects that expand the number of individuals enrolled in registered apprenticeship programs within the grant's performance period. So for the purposes of this program, eligible applicants are persons 16 years of age and older who are not enrolled in a registered apprenticeship program at the time of the initial grant service. So you must incorporate specific strategies to support or expand registered apprenticeship opportunities among all workers, including youth, women, people of color, formerly incarcerated individuals, and persons with disabilities, as well as the protected groups identified in this clause here. These activities must be in compliance with all state, local, and federal equal employment laws and civil rights protections. And further, the DAS is particularly interested in targeting groups most affected and displaced by the COVID-19 pandemic or other impacts on the state economy. If an applicant proposes serving groups affected or displaced by the pandemic, applicants must clearly identify these groups and how the pandemic has affected them. So I took the time to read each of these word by word because we will be referencing back to this particular section quite a bit. This is really the core of the eligibility for this grant. A few important definitions here. When we say traditional, also BC or construction, these are apprenticeship training programs in the building and construction or firefighter occupations. And when we say non-traditional, we're talking about non-construction. So these are apprenticeship programs in any trade or occupation other than the building and construction trades or firefighter occupations. So this goes to our very first question here, which is, may the building and fire trades apprenticeships apply for this funding? Is there any sector focus area to this FFP? And the answer here is that the purpose for the SAEEI grant is to fund new and innovative non-traditional apprenticeship programs. And the building and construction trades and firefighter protection trades are considered traditional apprenticeships and under the jurisdiction of the California Apprenticeship Council. So that's CAC, and as such are not eligible to apply for this grant. Question 2, I am seeking clarification on who qualifies to be the lead on this grant. Can registered apprenticeship programs apply? The answer is yes. In order to apply for the SAEEI grant, the lead entity applying must be either a local workforce development board or an apprenticeship program sponsor. Therefore, yes, a registered apprenticeship program sponsor can apply directly for this grant. However, it is a requirement that they also partner with a workforce development board. So this is what we were talking about earlier. So make sure that you have that workforce development board in the mix. Next question, the SAEEI grant application directions state that the required partners is a list of 4 entities: local workforce development boards, employer, organization, industry partner, local education agency, and local/regional community-based organization. In order to apply, will we need a partner from each of these 4 categories? The answer is yes. All 4 partners are required for the SAEEI grant. Next question, we are in the last stage of the DOL approving my apprenticeship program. Would we need to revamp the program, or could I simply adjust it to work with the population? Would those adjustments need to be submitted to the DOL? So the answer here is all programs that receive this grant will need to dual register their programs and apprentices with both the Department of Labor and DAS. Therefore, if you already have DOL approval, then you're off to a good start. And you will be required to also register with DAS. And in order to be well positioned to receive this grant, we do want you to demonstrate how you're creating an opportunity for women, justice involved, people with disabilities, and communities of color, and those that have been disproportionately impacted by coronavirus. So you do need to have that focus. The DAS unfortunately cannot confirm what would need to be changed or adjusted with the DOL. However, if you're changing your program, we would highly recommend you work with the DOL to keep them updated. We do have a dual registration template that works to make it easy to register with DOL and DAS. Does the SAEEI grant include CSUs? So the answer is California state universities can be the LEA, they can be the employer, or they can be the apprenticeship program sponsor. Therefore, yes, CSUs can apply if they fall under one of the above mentioned categories. And as always, please note that any grantee needs to be in partnership with a local workforce board. Next question, are we allowed to partner with existing apprenticeship programs in other areas, but use the grant to expand it into our area? So this SAEEI grant is designed to provide startup funding for creating new apprenticeship programs or for creating new occupations with existing registered apprenticeship programs. Therefore, a new apprenticeship program or an existing program that's adding an occupation will be eligible for this grant, as long as that new occupation was registered with DAS after July 1st, 2021. And again, I just want to highlight this. This is 2021, not 2022. So as long as you are a new program as of July 1st, 2021, you are eligible to apply. Next question, will CalJobs be the system of record for participants and financials? Will grant funding come through the EDD sub-grant agreement? So yes, CalJobs will be the system of record to report participants. Details for reporting participants and financials shall be determined and disclosed in the contracting phase of the grant. However, workforce boards are critical partners in this reporting, which is why they must be either the lead applicant or within the required set of partners. The grant funding will not be coming through EDD. DAS will be developing the sub-grant agreements. Can only local California workforce development boards apply? Our nonprofit already has a partnership with an employer who provides workforce training for our participants, and we have done pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeships with them. They have 9 registered apprenticeship pathways with DOL already. Given this information, would we be eligible to apply, or can nonprofits take advantage of this opportunity? Nonprofits can apply if they are the registered programs, the registered apprenticeship program sponsor, meaning that they are the lead and can actually register the program and the apprentices with DAS and DOL. Once again, they will also need a workforce development board in the mix of partners. And yes, you may work with an employer you already have a partnership with if you're developing a new DAS registered apprenticeship and or a new occupation for an existing DAS registered apprenticeship. So next question, we understand that there is a limited amount of funds available to be awarded. May we apply for the full 2.5 million and then be approved for less than that if DAS wants to give out more grant awards at lower amounts? And does lowering the requested amount increase our chances of approval? So the answer here is a lower award amount may be a possibility, but lowering the requested amount will not increase your chance of approval. Next question, are apprentice sponsors able to support multiple proposal applications? Apprenticeship sponsors are able to support multiple proposal applications. However, you cannot collect funds twice on the same apprentice. Where are the funds coming from for this grant? Are there any funding sources that these funds cannot combine with? Example, would it be from the same bucket as other WIOA funds, which would not allow us to thread together with other WIOA funds for these apprentices? So hopefully, as you learned from earlier in this presentation, this grant funding is coming from the Department of Labor, SAEEI grant. Therefore, it will not interfere with the program's ability to receive funding from additional funding sources. And DAS encourages grantees to braid funding sources. Next question, if one employer is willing to hire all the apprentices, is the requirement employers/industry partners still a requirement? When it comes to required partners, you need to have one from each category: workforce board, employer, LEA, and CBO. Therefore, one employer is sufficient and meets the requirement of employer/industry partner. Is pre-apprenticeship a positive metric for this grant? No, pre-apprenticeships are not a metric for the grant. can you provide examples of what you mean by online service provider? Online service providers could be any kind of online learning or coaching platform. And this is actually listed under the optional partner types. What is the number of enrollments to place for 2.5 million? It says 521 in the SFP, page 16 and 23, but it says 500 in Exhibit B, project narrative. Good catch. The numbers are calculated based on $4,800 per apprentice. Therefore, for the 2.5 million, that calculates to 521 participants. Sorry for the inconsistency. Next question. We are a for-profit California company currently working towards possibly creating our foundation. In this case, should we apply as a for-profit entity or nonprofit organization, supposing we will have our foundation established at the time the proposal is submitted? The answer is that what entity applies for the grant is your option, but in any case, the grantee must partner with a workforce board and have all the required partners in the mix. Next question, if we create a new apprenticeship with this funding opportunity, what is timeline for approval? Will these apprenticeships be given priority or expedited approval by the state and the DOL? Once DAS and the grantee execute the DAS SAEEI subgrant agreement, the grantee and DAS shall draft the dual DAS DOL apprenticeship standard. The new standard requires a 30-day public posting on the DAS website, and if there are no comments, the program standards may be approved, and the new program may start registering apprentices. All programs will have the opportunity to become registered with both the state of California and the Department of Labor, but there will not be a priority list. The SAEEI grant programs will be a priority in development and approval, but the 30-day public posting requirement for all new apprenticeship programs or existing programs wanting to add a new occupation may not be waived. May applicants propose apprenticeships in various occupational sectors? Yes, applicants may propose apprenticeships in various occupational sectors as long as the occupational sectors are within the non-traditional sectors, which we defined, I think it was in question 1. Must all apprenticeships include unions, or can apprenticeships occur with non-union organizations and occupations? So while apprenticeships may include unions, they are not a required partner. The grant applicants are free to develop union or non-union programs, or a combination of both types of programs. We are a jobs works center operating under WIOA and are seeking to expand our center to include an apprenticeship program. Can a center such as this apply for an apprenticeship grant, or are we required to request such funding from the local workforce board? So yes, as a job center, you can apply as an apprenticeship program sponsor, and you must also include a local workforce board, an employer, and a local education agency. Would an apprenticeship program sponsor require a workforce development board to act as fiscal sponsor? Apprenticeship sponsors are eligible to apply. However, an apprenticeship sponsor would need a local workforce development board to be their fiscal sponsor. Participants receive a full array of career basic and career individualized services, including career assessment, planning, case management, and training. If workforce boards are only reimbursed at 90-day retention after employment, and an apprentice leaves the job before the 90 days, does that mean that there is no reimbursement for services provided prior to employment? Yes, that is correct. Please clarify regarding pay for performance model, page 17, for the 90-day retention in employment required. Does employment as an apprentice count? We wish to confirm that you do not mean unsubsidized employment after the RAP has been completed. So the pay for performance model requires a 90-day retention in employment as an apprentice before the grantee can submit a claim for payment on individual apprentices under the grant. And just to keep diving into this topic, do registered apprentices need to complete their whole apprenticeship during the performance period of the grant in order to be counted towards the metric? Or are they counted when they are registered? SFP page 17. What is the required number of participants who need to reach 90-day retention in order to be reimbursed for the ongoing program costs after the startup costs? So in order to be counted into the metric, an apprentice needs to be registered with the program and complete their 90 days within the grant period. The first 25% of the funding that you can get reimbursed or granted upon award to cover startup costs, right? And then the remaining 75% sub-grant reimbursement will be dispersed through a pay for performance model to recipients after a 90-day retention of employment as an apprentice and registration with DAS's CAS stands for California Apprenticeship System, DOL's Rapids, and CalJobs, which is part of what the workforce boards are so critical around supporting with the CalJobs reporting in particular. So once this criteria has been met, grant recipients are permitted to submit allowable grant line item expenditure requests. So you can consider the first 25% to be the first $1,200 per apprentice that a grantee will be receiving. Then, once an apprentice is registered and retained for 90 days in the apprenticeship, the grantee can invoice for the remaining $3,600 per apprentice in expenses. Therefore, there is not a minimum number of initial apprentices, but rather once a grantee has registered and retained apprentices for 90 days, they can submit an invoice. Next question here. Our program is in multiple locations throughout the state. Would we need to work with a local workforce development board in all locations? Or could one workforce development board be the main administrator of an application in more than one location? So it is up to the local workforce development boards to work out such partnership and agreements with the other workforce boards as part of the grant application. They may report in the application the costs of having other workforce boards report the participant data into CalJobs for the participants working in counties under their jurisdiction. So again, such arrangements should be part of the grant application and comply with the workforce board policies. May we submit our employer commitment letters addressed to the program sponsors? Note, these letters are not addressed to the lead applicant. Do our employers have to specify numbers of apprentices they will hire, or can they just confirm partnership and support? So the letters addressed to the program sponsors are acceptable. Employers need only confirm partnership and support. There is not a requirement that employers state a certain number of apprentices they plan to hire. All letters of support must be dated between January 14th, 2022 and March 30th, 2022. However, in your overall proposal as the lead applicant, you will need to commit to a certain number of apprentices that you will register through the support of this grant. We are currently piloting a new workforce development program. We are hoping to turn it into an official apprenticeship opportunity, but since it is small and just initiating, is it possible to apply for an exemption to minimum award amount? May we request funding for less than 50 participants, somewhere around $50,000 to $100,000? Unfortunately, the minimum award amount is set forth in the SFP, and DAS is not allowed to waive this requirement. All right, Exhibit D does not have boxes for annual targets, nor a breakdown of apprentices enrolled in new RAPs and apprentices enrolled in new occupations in existing RAPs as requested in Exhibit B, Program Narrative. It is also lacking boxes for other metrics requested in Exhibit B, such as total participants served non-registered apprenticeship. Since the proposal instruction states complete only the required information in the exhibits, do not change or alter, do we need a separate matrix in our program narrative for outcomes to cover these required metrics? The answer here is yes. A separate matrix in narrative format is needed to describe the outcomes to cover these required metrics. Exhibit B, program narrative states, quote, applicants must provide a matrix that clearly identifies the outcomes and the output that the project is designed to achieve. This matrix will include annual target outcomes that will be used for the purpose of technical assistance. In addition, applicants must describe in a narrative format how these outcomes and outputs align with their project goals. Furthermore, quote, the applicants must include comprehensive numerical projections for each of the 7 output and outcome measures identified below and defined in Exhibit D. Getting into the weeds here. Thanks for sticking with me. Okay, next question. In Exhibit B, there are 2 separate outcomes mentioned. Total participants who complete a RAP and total participants who receive a certificate of completion of a RAP. Can you explain the difference? The 2 statements are the same in that any participant that successfully completes the RAP still receives a certificate of completion. Is supplemental budget Exhibit H required for equipment and or procurement of any contractual services, page 27 of SFP, or only for equipment, page 13 of proposal instructions? So the answer here is supplemental budget Exhibit H is required if the proposal includes the purchase of any equipment over $5,000 or the procurement of any contractual services regardless of dollar amount. Exhibit H, supplemental budget, page 13 of proposal instructions. If applicant plans to purchase equipment that has a unit cost of $5,000 or more and a useful life of more than 1 year, the applicant must complete the supplemental budget exhibit, SFP Exhibit H, Section 1, Equipment. Due to the short-term nature of these projects, applicants are encouraged to lease or rent high-cost equipment. If applicants plan to budget contractual services, the supplemental budget exhibit, SFP Exhibit H, Section 2, contractual services must be completed. I also just want to flag, we had a little snafu and did not have Exhibit H up there. Thank you to the person who asked this question. It is already up on our website, so thank you for catching that, and that Exhibit H is available on our website. And last but not least, question number 31. We've gotten through a lot of content here. Do we still have time to apply? Yes, absolutely. So we are requesting that interested applicants submit a letter of intent by March 1st. That is tomorrow. So I said this at the beginning, but I'll say this again. We would greatly appreciate if folks could submit a letter of intent. Don't overthink it. It can be an email. It can be formal and on letterhead if you want it to be, but don't stress about that. It can just be as simple as an email to this email here on the slides, and perhaps one of my team members could put it in the chat for folks. Please let us know if you're intending to apply. It's really helpful to us to know so that we can plan accordingly, so that we can try to turn around our evaluation and announcement side of things efficiently, if we can get a sense of how many folks are planning to apply. I see we have quite a few people in this webinar, so I sense lots of interest, but it's very, very helpful for us to understand the numbers behind this. And of course, and very importantly, the final applications must be submitted electronically. Again, electronically, not by paper, but electronically to DAS on or before March 30th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Late proposals will not be accepted and exceptions will not be allowed, and there's no appeal for not meeting the proposal deadline. So please get organized, and you can be submitting materials to this email, which is the same email that's throughout all of the materials. And it's also, if you submitted questions, it's the same email that you submitted questions to. So we're asking you to submit your packet there. So with that, we have covered a lot of information. I'm proud and happy to be giving you a few minutes back in your day thank you so much for joining. And honestly, thank you most for all the great work that you're doing to build apprenticeship programs. It's so important. This work is really creating an opportunity to lift up a lot of folks who need lifting up and need this economic opportunity. And this grant is a really cool opportunity to focus on those populations and to hopefully help you build these programs that are preparing folks for in-demand jobs. So thank you so much for joining and for all the work that you do. And we really look forward to seeing all of the proposals that get submitted. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day.